Geoff Duncan, are you with us?
Loud and clear, Peter.
Thank you so much for joining us here at Marcys Law, Why We Do What We Do interview series, where we try to highlight people who are supportive of the victims' rights movement, specifically Marcys Law. And we have been doing this all throughout the country for the last couple of years, and we've had great leaders in the victims' rights movement, from district attorneys to attorneys general, to survivors of violent crime who have helped to support victims' rights legislation throughout the country, and statewide elected leaders like yourself. So thanks so much for taking the time. I want to talk a little bit about who you are and how you came to be a vocal proponent of not just victims' rights, but Marcys Law in the state of Georgia. Geoff Duncan has probably one of the greatest bios of elected leaders in the state of Georgia, but also in the country. He's a former professional baseball player, played 6 seasons in professional baseball, was a pitcher for Georgia Tech. And after, I think was it a shoulder injury, Geoff?
Yeah, unfortunately.
That forced Geoff out of baseball, but into, thankfully, into the lives of the citizens of the state that he now represents. You took a little detour and was CEO of a healthcare company, and then ran successfully for the state house and state representative office in Georgia, where you served for, was it 5 years?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
And then became the lieutenant governor of Georgia, and where you are still lieutenant governor now, and you've decided not to run for re-election.
That's correct.
But that has not stopped you in spearheading some incredible initiatives, and specifically for our talk today, some initiatives around victims' rights and public safety. You became the lieutenant governor of Georgia. One of the things that you did that a lot of public officials don't do was you actually stepped away from your office of state representative to concentrate on your run for statewide office in 2018. And that happened to be the same year that we as Marcys Law were in Georgia trying to get victims' rights, constitutional rights passed in the form of a statewide constitutional amendment in the state of Georgia. You got elected lieutenant governor that year in 2018, and Marcys Law was passed, ensuring that constitutional rights, enforceable constitutional rights for victims, was passed in Georgia. I think that Marcys Law passed 80% to 20% with over 3 million statewide votes.
Marcys Law got more votes than I did.
Well, we appreciate your support. I know that you were supportive of it as a state representative while it was winding its way through the state house. And then you were able to vote for it as a citizen of Georgia, and you have been incredibly supportive of it since. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and Peter, I want to tell you this too. I watched this process from start to finish with Marcys Law as it was initially introduced in the legislature, in the committee process, the advocates, the lobbying groups, and then I watched it go all the way through the ballot initiative piece, where I was on the road campaigning, begging people to vote for me for lieutenant governor. There was informational opportunities all across the state to just better understand the ballot question out there. So I just want to applaud you guys. I don't know if I've ever seen a more successful effort, a more informational packed effort in Georgia in my 10 years of kind of hanging around the political hoop.
Well, that's really nice. We do put a great effort in. And one of the things that we do is we find the support, and we try to partner with community leaders and elected officials of like mind who are partners with us in the cause, like yourself. So we appreciate all of your efforts too. And like I said, not just as a state representative, but since you have taken your statewide leadership post, you have not forgotten where you came from on a whole lot of levels. And one of the things that we do in Marcys Law, you and I discussed, is after we pass our initiative in a state, we don't just leave that state and go to another state. Although we do go to other states to get it passed, we keep a team in the state where it is passed to make sure that it's being implemented correctly, to be able to answer questions on the ground to the extent that people have them, and how they're supposed to be implemented, what the rights actually are supposed to look like. And we also try to see if we can improve on other victims' rights initiatives and introduce new victims' rights initiatives with partners like yourself. One of the things that we've done recently in the Georgia Assembly is help to introduce the Criminal Records Responsibility Act. And we have been blessed to have the support of a lot of state leaders like yourself and also State Senator Bo Hatchett, who has sponsored the bill. Could you tell us a little bit about the Criminal Record Responsibility Act? And if you could, I know you told me that there was a specific story that was similar to one of the reasons why Marcys Law actually started in the first place, where there was someone, it was a notification problem within the criminal justice system in Georgia.
Yeah, so I arrived in the legislature in 2013 when I got sworn in, just completely naive to this issue as a whole. I certainly grateful to never have been a victim, or really anybody in my inner circle being a victim. But when I started to hear the stories unpack, it was just jaw dropping as to the lack of coordination and the lack of information. And so watching Marcys Law come through was very inspiring to see the difference it could make. And so now, as the president of the Senate, I have an opportunity to really kind of lead with some big policy ideas, and we wanted to make sure that we continue to look for ways to innovate around government. And our GCIC computer is the format, is the hub for information to be gathered. And it's you got to have inputs to get outputs. And so certainly we have seen so many stories continue to build over and over and over again about decisions not being made, both in pro and con, right? Somebody wanting to get an apartment lease, and the GCIC computer is not updated with a final disposition that the charges were dropped. Or to the flip side, you're trying to get employment and somebody's got a violent aggravated assault and the final disposition is not updated in the GCIC computer. And so, look, we have the information's available. It's just we got to make it. We've got to enter it in and be able to access to it. And so that's really what this act is about: is creating a centralized hub and some accountability to enter that information. Because if we don't, then we're only as good as the information that's in front of us. One of the stories that was just jaw-dropping through this committee process as it played out, and Senator Bo Hatchett's done an incredible job of really leading on this. He's a really talented individual, and he serves in North Georgia as an attorney. Miriam Abdul-Rab was a bartender in Atlanta, and she got in a car after her shift was over, drove to a gas station, and then she left there to go to her boyfriend's residence. And somebody followed her and they kidnapped her. And there was just a horrible series of crimes that happened, and ultimately leading to her murder. And when you unwound that awful crime or series of crimes, I think what was realized was this was a sexual predator who was sentenced to 15 years for a multitude of crimes, all sexual related, molestation, just I could go on and on and on and on. He served 7 of the 15 and then came out. And the apparatus that we have in place to make sure that we're following up, and I don't know the exact group or whatnot, but there's an assigned group that is supposed to follow these people and make sure they're integrating back in the way that the judge thought or the sentencing process was adjusted to. And that didn't happen. There was no information being shared. And it was just a tragedy to think of how that could have been. Somebody could have injected themselves into that situation if they just had the information at their fingertips. That story times 1,000 others that we all unfortunately know and sit on the tips of our tongue.
Yeah, and just to give people an idea of what we're talking about and how many counties there are 159 counties in the state of Georgia. Is that right? As far as trying to get
we have the second most counties behind Texas, and it goes back to the 1700s, but 159 unique counties.
Yeah, and so notification, I mean, something as simple as notification, you think would, especially in 2022, would be something that would have been figured out with all of the technology we have at our fingertips. But it takes something like this with the help of Marcys Law, coupled with a state senator like Bo Hatchett and a lieutenant governor like you, who's going to be able to use the bully pulpit. And also you happen to be the Senate president in the state too. Tell us a little bit about how that works and how you're able to use your position as the state Senate president, as well as the lieutenant governor of Georgia, to help things like this act get passed and get attention.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Peter. So, I never grew up wanting to be in politics. It certainly wasn't on my bucket list. And so when the notion came to run for office to try to make a difference in my state, and in my community, I ran at the chance, and we worked hard. But I've always run on this format of policy over politics. And I came into the system and got elected, and I realized that it was an inverse. There was so much politics going on and very little policy being produced. And so I woke up one day as a state representative and said, I either want to be in charge or go home. Because if I'm in charge and if I can become the president of the Senate, then I can absolutely steer the chamber to focus on policies like this. And so I've led for the last 4 years with that policy over politics format. We have, the currency I trade in the Senate is honesty. Whether it's something you want to hear or not hear, I'm going to share it with you, and vice versa. And that honest discussion, fact-based discussion, allows us to get big things like this across the finish line and be able to serve the needs of 11 million Georgians in 159 different counties. I get to, in my position, really kind of shape the committees, who's in those committees, what legislation's assigned to each committees, and then what legislation ultimately comes to the floor and what's ready for game time. And certainly this is one of those measures.
Well, one of the things about what we do here at Marcys Law is Marcys Law and victims' rights, and to try to help survivors of crime, is really an issue, a policy issue that transcends politics, transcends party politics, really should transcend partisan division. And you as an elected official and you as a leader are a refreshing personality to have in this day and age of politics, when you see people get so divided almost over almost every single policy issue. And it's all, like you said, driven by honesty and driven by common sense. And so whether it's the Criminal Record Responsibility Act or another initiative that I wanted to talk to you about, you had a recent op-ed that appeared in Newsweek, and you talked a little bit about what's called the Less Crime Act, which stands for Law Enforcement Strategic Support. And one of the things that you wrote about in the op-ed was tackling crime and the rising crime rate that we're seeing all across the country, and especially with respect to what you're doing in Georgia. I want you to tell us a little bit about what's going on in Georgia, specifically Atlanta. And what you said was the following: tackling crime is a three-dimensional challenge that requires more than just a government solution. Beyond the human toll, high crime rates carry massive economic impacts that stretch well beyond public safety. According to a Vanderbilt University study, personal crime costs the United States $2.6 trillion, which is 13% of our total GDP. Now, you happen to be, and I say happen to be because it's just tangential. It's not what drives you in this policy area or anything that I've seen with respect to your leadership. You happen to be a conservative Republican, but what you do and what motivates you really transcends your party and really any specific ideology, because I've seen you time and again, whether it's with Marcys Law, the Criminal Record Responsibility Act, or this Less Crime Act, just come together around a common purpose and bring Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and progressives together to talk honestly, to talk openly, to talk with data, and to talk with common sense. Tell us how you did that with the Less Crime Act.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for good leadership, Peter. I'm fortunate in my baseball career to have been coached by some of the best people in baseball and the best leaders. And so for me, leadership is about steering things in the right direction, but also taking input. And in the political world, and as you're shaping policy, I buy into the Ronald Reagan theory of, with me 80% of the time, you're a friend and an ally, not a traitor. And so I think the other team can help us make stuff better. And I've tried to build an atmosphere of inclusivity inside the Senate and along my political track. And so the Less Crime Act, for me, I recognize that crime is a bipartisan problem. When somebody goes to mug you, they don't ask you if you're a Democrat or Republican. They just want your money. They want to rob you. They want to hurt you. And so I wanted to find a bipartisan solution. So that's exactly what Less Crime is. It's a laser-focused state tax credit that allows you to give money directly to a law enforcement agency. And in return, you get a dollar-for-dollar tax credit. So if you owe the state of Georgia $5,000 and you write a check to your local law enforcement office for $5,000, you don't pay any state tax. $100 million cap. It's a big problem, and so we're going to use a big number to help fix it. In return, those law enforcement officers, agencies can only spend the money 5 ways: hire more officers, pay them more, train them better, equip them better, or fund a co-responder model for mental health issues that arrive, to be able to allow a professional mental health behavior expert to follow the law enforcement officer on the scene. We got 52-0 in the Senate. 52-0 signed, voted yes on this bill in the Senate. And I'm proud that Democrats and Republicans were able to all vote together to refund the police, and not this silly notion that we should defund the police.
It sounds like a Georgia football score.
Yeah.
52-0.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
This year. I went to
Yeah.
Georgia Tech, so we're coming back next year.
Yeah. Well, it was nice that you gave Los Angeles a chance to win the Super Bowl, since Georgia won the national championship in college football and the Braves won the World Series.
Yeah, we're tired of being in the news between elections and civil unrest and all that stuff.
Well, speaking of Georgia Tech, there was a guy that went to Georgia Tech with you. I don't think I think you went there. You may have overlapped at some point at Georgia Tech. He happens to be the new mayor of Atlanta, and he's a Democrat. And he's obviously very interested in what's happening with respect to public safety and the rising crime rates in cities all across America, specifically Atlanta, the city he now leads. You're the Republican lieutenant governor. He's a Democrat mayor of Atlanta. What does he think about the Less Crime Act? Did you talk to him about it?
Absolutely. So we both arrive to work every day as Georgians. And I think there's this newfound energy inside the city of Atlanta now that Andre Dickens nearly 2 months ago was sworn in as the mayor. And, day one, he's making the right phone calls. He's going to visit all the folks around the city, and he understands the size of the problem, which I think is a most important starting spot. He understands how bad crime is in Atlanta and how intentional we have to be to get us out of this. And so we've worked together. I introduced this to him as a concept sitting on my couch just a few days after he got elected. And we ended up coming back and we showed him the final piece of legislation, and he gave us an incredible vote of confidence and support for it. And look, I hope this is a tool. It's not going to be the everything, all things. It's not like he can just go ahead and say crime's taken care of, but it is an incredibly powerful tool to allow him to once again gain the confidence of those law enforcement officers that some of them left. I mean, when the civil unrest happened and our former mayor and others walked away from supporting law enforcement officers, 400 plus officers left. They went somewhere else or retired. And we can't protect our citizens if we don't have officers. And so this gives us an opportunity to kind of hit the reset button and go back to work and keep people safe.
Well, it's interesting and it's innovative thinking by you and by Mayor Andre Dickens to come together. And did you say that you recently appeared on a national television show with, of all people, a state legislator from the other party as well?
Yeah, Sonia Halpern joined me on MSNBC Morning Joe yesterday. We had a great back and forth about supporting this Less Crime Act. And this is going to benefit her district. And she's been a great ally of ours on this issue. And look, I wanted to take this issue out of the hands of the outside 5% that feel like politicizing crime is either for profit in their business, or if it's some sort of narrative that sounds good on Twitter for 10 seconds. I actually want to solve the problem, and I think that's a great place for future leaders to hang their hat, is being known as a solution finder, not a problem starter.
Well, the interesting thing is a lot of times people will talk in sound bites, and a lot of times people will do this in order to get elected. And like you said, the worst thing that you can have in campaigners and then ultimately elected officials are people who overpromise and underdeliver. And
yeah.
Tell us.
And I'm here to tell you, anybody listening, this job's not worth it unless you're actually solving problems. It's a shallow style of leadership if all you do is think in 10-second sound bites or think in 280 characters on Twitter. Certainly those are tools to use to grow your influence and message, but this job is totally worth it if you dive into things like foster care, healthcare, victims' rights, all of those things. This job's worth it whether you serve 2 years, 4 years, or 40 years. If you can look at the list of accomplishments on not what you've done for yourself, but what you've done for others. That's the measure of success, in my opinion, of a public servant.
Well, what you've got a record of actually looking at a problem and identifying it and then figuring out a way that you can actually solve it, as opposed to a lot of times people will say, they'll take, for instance, people will say, let's bring the public sector and the private sector together to solve problems. And that sounds great on the campaign trail. And then when people get elected, things get stuck. Things get stuck in the legislature. Things get stuck in committees. Like you said, you've been in a position now where you can actually have a little bit of a say in what gets out of a committee and what actually gets done. What I found to be very common sense driven and just a practical solution is to actually put into into motion the idea of the public sector and the private sector working together. Too many times these days, you'll see camps just retreat to one cable station versus another cable station, one line of thinking versus another line of thinking, complaining on talk radio, complaining to their neighbors, and saying, "Well, I'm going to just start a GoFundMe page. That's what people should do instead of," because the government has no idea what they're doing with the taxpayers' money. And there's a little bit of, I can see the anger on both sides. But instead of just kind of succumbing to any of that, what you did was you said, okay, I think the private sector could actually contribute here too. And if you want to actually do something about keeping law enforcement officers on the job, stopping them from retiring early, if you want to actually do that, we'll actually, as government officials, figure out a way to literally reimburse you. So when you talk about 100% tax credit, could you just describe what that actually means to the average citizen of Georgia? If the average citizen of Georgia says, you know what, this sounds like a great idea, I want to contribute $1,000, I want to contribute $100 to the Atlanta Police Department. How does that work?
Yeah, so the first time I dabbled in this was really what put me on the map over in the House of Representatives. Rural hospitals were failing at an alarming pace here in Georgia. So I created a tax credit specifically focused to 57 rural hospitals and empowered communities, individuals and corporations to directly contribute to those rural hospitals. And then they could spend the money the way they needed to with no government red tape or bureaucracy. And almost overnight, those hospitals were fully funded with $60 million. I rolled that concept over with obviously a number of tweaks on the law enforcement side. But yeah, if you as an individual, it's $5,000 is your max. As a married couple, it's $10,000 as a max. And as a pass-through corporate entity, it's 75% of your state tax income liability. So these are big numbers, and it's $100 million. And so if my wife and I, Brooke and I, wanted to go write a $10,000, we owe Georgia $10,000 or more. I write a check for 10 grand, give it to Forsyth County Sheriff's Office up here to their foundation, right? So we're not giving it, we're not paying off tickets or anything like that. It's to a foundation. And that foundation directs those dollars into one of those 5 buckets that we talked about. And in return, I pay the state of Georgia $10,000 less in state income tax. That simple. When it gets to 100 million, the program's over, and you roll over to the next year.
And it's dollar for dollar.
Yeah. And Peter, look, I want to make sure I get this. So if I rewind before I talked about the rural hospitals, for me, there's this concept I call the 4 C's: churches, charities, corporations, and citizens. And the 4 C's are better at tackling these issues around poverty and civil issues than government ever is going to be. You alluded to it a second ago. Government has a place, it just doesn't have every place. It creates coordination and structure. But if we as citizens in our community stop caring about those in need, or stop looking for ways to do the right thing and just turn our responsibilities completely over to the government, none of us are going to be happy on either side of the aisle. It's going to be a train wreck. And so I always look for ways to deploy the 4 C's, whether it be foster care, homelessness, hunger, healthcare for low-income individuals, crime, or victims' rights. Any of that, I really try to look for ways to laser focus those dollars.
Now, I know you have your hands full in just getting this passed in Georgia, but have you and Mayor Dickens had a chance to talk to other leaders from other urban centers, any other mayors interested in this?
So we're going to get this across the finish line. As you're well aware, the legislative process is complicated and arduous, and good with good purpose. We'll get through it, and certainly I think, like the rural hospital tax credit, other states have copied us. And look, nothing is prouder for us here in Georgia than if other states want to know or copy what we're doing. We've certainly been in the headlines the last couple of years, and I'd like to have a positive influence on the rest of the country and really show them what we're capable of doing here.
Yeah, well, I want to take just another excerpt from your op-ed. To all those using serious societal problems to score political points, we can do better. Solutions grounded in common sense with an ability to make a difference are not totally out of reach. A Democratic mayor and a Republican lieutenant governor are taking steps toward doing that in Georgia. Let's hope others are paying attention.
Yeah.
And I really do think, and I don't think this, forgive me if this sounds too idealistic, but because of the fact that this is so common sense driven and has legitimate bipartisan support, I think what you're doing in Georgia, not just for this particular policy, but the culture that you're creating, and you're showing that a culture of bipartisanship actually does work. That it's not just rhetoric. It's not just somebody standing at a podium saying, we need to work together. You are doing it. You are working together. You have legislation that's actually moving, and it's benefiting victims of crime. It's benefiting the citizens of Atlanta. It's benefiting the citizens of Georgia. You deserve an enormous amount of credit, you and your Democratic colleagues.
Well, yeah, and this is certainly a team. I want to give everybody the credit for not only in the Senate, but we've been able to do a number of things around our hate crimes legislation that we were able to pass bipartisanly. Our colleagues in the House, the governor's been a great teammate. But Peter, the thing that I smile the most with is I wake up in the morning and I realize this thesis I wrote before I ran for lieutenant governor of, hey, I can be a conservative. I don't have to check my conservative values at the door, but I can work with the other side and look for consensus. I now am 4 years into this experiment, and it works. And I can only imagine on a bigger scale, on a national scale, if we took this approach, you could see us once again all realizing on both sides of the aisle that our best days are in front of us, because they truly are.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you as your rep. I just want to thank you for the support that you have given and continue to give to victims in Georgia and survivors of crime, starting with when we were trying to get Marcys Law passed. We did have a great coordinated effort, but it is a large undertaking to try to get a constitutional amendment passed in a state. Governor Kemp was also very helpful and supportive. You guys are a great team. And like I said, we don't leave as an organization, Marcys Law. We stay and continue to support victims and victims' rights and the cause. And to have allies like you is absolutely essential to getting things done and moving things forward. The Criminal Record Responsibility Act is a perfect example. Once that is passed and the notification system is more streamlined, that will actually help Georgia and the state and all of the state government better meet its obligations that are granted, that has been granted to citizens of Georgia from Marcys Law being passed.
Well, and thanks for your hard work on the Marcys Law and all the great work for the organization getting us to this point and modeling how important this issue is. And it's going to have all kinds of different continued spokes. This is just one of those. And we'll never be able to count the wins, right? Informing people to make qualified decisions. We'll never be able to know all the people's lives that we've saved, all the heartache that we've prevented, but it's certainly all worth it.
Yeah. And, you know, the story that you talked about, I believe her name is Miriam Abdul-Rab, the Atlanta bartender who was viciously murdered. If there is just one case like that, like you said, we can never be able to count all the wins, but if we can even just prevent one more case like that with the work of you and your colleagues, we can consider all of this a success. So thank you for all you're doing. And I really, really hope that other leaders from around the country look to you and your leadership, but also your approach of common sense and honesty.
Well, thanks, Peter. And I'm proud to be on a good team down here in Georgia.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it, Geoff.
Take care. Have a great day.
Have a great day.